Greetings and salutations, all. I.S. Anderson here once again. And first of all, I'd just like to welcome all my new subscribers. I've noticed I've got a bunch of new ones lately, so I'd just like to say welcome all. And today we're going to do another Game of Thrones video. Yes, I know that a lot of people like me to do Game of Thrones videos. Only instead of a book discussion or, talk about predictions of the future or try to figure out, clues as to what's going on, today we're going to get completely into the realm of speculation. We're going to think about what could have happened in the story had it had something else in the past, been different. So now, at what point in Game of Thrones, Ned confronts Cersei about her incestuous relationship with Jaime, and he tells her, I'm going to tell Robert and all that stuff. But eventually the conversation comes around to, Cersei asked Ned why he didn't take the throne when he had the chance. According to Cersei, all Ned had to do was just walk up the steps, sit on the throne himself, and then he would have been declared king. Personally, I think it would have been a little bit more complicated than that, but we'll just go with that for now. Ned tells Cersei that if he had taken the throne, that would have been a mistake. She disagreed, and reminds him of the rule of the Game of Thrones. You either win or you die. There is no in-between. So who is really right? Would it have been a mistake for Ned to just sit on the throne and take it and become the king? Or did he do the right thing by just saying, yeah, Robert, go ahead and take it? Now, looking back on it, you could probably say, no, I think that was a mistake letting Robert take the throne because Robert was not a good king, which he wasn't. And, eventually when he did get himself killed in the most idiotic way imaginable, things really did hit the fan, and so yeah, maybe Ned should have been king from the beginning, and maybe none of that would have happened. Or maybe things would have gone downhill a lot quicker. Now, before we get into this conversation, let's just do a quick recap on the sack of King's Landing, which is the most relevant part of Robert's rebellion to this conversation. Okay, so right after the Battle of the Trident, Robert is a bit too wounded to go to the capital himself and lead the siege against King's Landing. So he sends Ned instead. But anyway, long before Ned can get there, the Lannisters, namely Tywin Lannister, gets the idea, well, it looks like the rebels are going to win, so I'm going to automatically switch to their side. After both sides have been begging for my help all along, I'm going to choose the side that has already won. So he arrives at King's Landing, and he basically sends in the message to King Aerys, let us in, we're here to protect you, we're here to save you from the rebels and all that stuff. And of course, everybody kind of sees through it because it's Tywin Lannister. But anyway, Maester Pycelle convinces Aerys to let them in because the Lannisters have already been friends. So he goes, oh, okay, I believe you. And he lets him in, and then Tywin and his 40-some thousand men start to kill everybody in the city and start rummaging and basically taking it over. Now, when exactly Ned arrives with his army is not exactly sure, at least not to me. I believe he gets there right at the aftermath of it, and he sees all this devastation going on, and he sees what the Lannisters are doing. They're killing a lot of innocent people, and this kind of pisses him off. So he immediately rushes to the castle, and he fights off some people, fights off some remaining Targaryen forces and some Lannister forces. Ned himself enters the throne room, and he finds Jaime there, sitting up on the throne, with King Aerys lying there in a pool of his own blood, face down, and he realizes that Jaime has just killed King Aerys. And Ned tells Jaime, get off that damn throne now, and Jaime complies with him. And after Ned tells Jaime to get off the throne, then later he finds, the Targaryen children plus Lyanna Martell. He finds their bodies wrapped in Lannister cloaks, dead, slain by the mountain. And Ned is not very happy about this. Now, in the original history, at this point, they just say, okay, let's chill out, let's wait for Robert to come. They wait for Robert to come, and Robert just, assesses what's going on here. And he pretty much forgives Tywin because he's glad that Tywin sacked the city for him. And Robert and Ned have a big falling out, and so Ned just says, fine, I'm just going to go out, I'm going to freeze the siege, I'm going to save your brother, and then I'm going to go find Lyanna. Now, okay, so so that's basically the story as we know it. So now let's think, what if Ned had to tell Jaime to get off the throne, and then got on himself. So by the time Robert had been there, Ned would have already been king. Now, as we all know, Ned was a pretty honorable guy. He was from the North, where they value such things. It was always in his mind, the one who passes the sentence should also swing the sword. So, and Robert and Tywin were certainly not like that, and Jon Arryn kind of served as a buffer in between the two. Now, as far as how would Robert react to Ned being king? That's kind of hard to speculate because I think we can all tell that Robert didn't really like being king. He liked being a soldier, he liked being a womanizer, but he really did not like ruling. Now, before he actually became a ruler, he might not have realized that, and he might have been, well, I don't think he was fighting the war thinking, yeah, I'm going to be king. But we do know that once he was king, he wasn't really happy about it. So would he have, been all pissed off at Ned because Ned had taken the throne? Maybe, but I think he would have gotten over it pretty quick. He would have been like, yeah, that's good. It's because he knows what kind of a guy Ned is. So I think, so he's probably thinking, yeah, he'd probably be a good king. So I don't think Robert would have been all that pissed off that Ned would have been taking the throne. Personally, Jon Arryn, I don't think Jon Arryn would have been all that pissed off. I think he would have been, fine with Ned taking the throne. But then we come to Tywin Lannister. Now, on the onset, what reason does Tywin have to hate Ned? Nothing really. However, the whole, aftermath of the sacking of King's Landing would have been handled a hell of a lot differently if Ned had been the king instead of Robert. Now, the first thing we need to talk about is Jaime Lannister. Now, in the original, what actually happened in the story was after Robert became king, he just gave Jaime a royal pardon. He was probably glad that he killed King Aerys, and Jaime remains a Kingsguard, and, stays doing what he's doing, yada yada. Now, however, if Ned had been the king, see, in the original story, Ned didn't want Robert to pardon Jaime. Ned wanted to send Jaime to the wall because basically he did betray his king. I mean, he killed him while he still was king, so technically he did do a crime. But you see, the thing is, I think Ned kind of resented Jaime. For one thing, Jaime was there when his father Rickard and his brother Brandon were killed by the Mad King Aerys, and he didn't do anything to stop it. I mean, neither did anybody else, I should say. But Jaime was there, and he witnessed it, and he said nothing, and he did nothing. And I think Robert always kind of resented Jaime for that, but not completely, because he realizes, what could have Jaime done? I mean, he still think he should have done something, but I think he can understand why Jaime didn't do anything. But then we come to the fact that Jaime did kill Mad King Aerys. Now, we know why he did that. We the reader and the audience, we know why he did that. He did that to save King's Landing, but he never did tell Ned Stark about this. So as far as Ned was concerned, Jaime was just somebody who, basically took the opportunity to kill him and gain favor with the rebels and just save his own skin. Plus, I have a feeling Ned kind of wanted to kill Aerys himself. I mean, he never openly said that, but you think about it, King Aerys, I mean, he killed his father and his brother in a rather brutal way. And Ned he's very honorable, and he's thinking, a debt of blood needs to be paid. So he probably wanted to kill Aerys himself, and Jaime denied him that by stabbing him in the back. So I think, with those two things, I think Ned was very resentful of Jaime. So, yeah, if Ned had been king, Jaime would have ended up on the wall. Yeah, not something you want to do if you want to win favor with the Lannisters. Then we come to Cersei marrying Robert. Now, Ned was already married to Catelyn by the time of the sack of King's Landing. So Tywin can't marry Cersei to Ned. That just can't happen. Now, would he have tried to marry Cersei off to Robert? That is possible, and Cersei certainly would have been up to it at the time, because, as we know, when she actually married Robert, she was just so happy. because he's Robert Baratheon, probably the biggest badass in the whole Seven Kingdoms at the time. I mean, you know, those years of being the king made him go soft. But at the time of his rebellion, I mean, he was probably the most feared fighter in the whole realms. He probably could have easily taken Gregor Clegane in those days. So anyway, to make a long story short, I think Cersei would have been willing to go through with it, but I'm not sure Tywin would have really made the effort to marry off Cersei to Robert because he's the head of House Baratheon at this point, but he's still not a king. I mean, he might have, but the bottom line is he doesn't get to marry Cersei off to the king. And remember, he had already been snubbed once. He tried to marry Cersei off to Prince Rhaegar, but Aerys was having none of that. So Tywin was already pissed off about that. So now if he had been snubbed by Aerys and now he can't marry Cersei off to the next king because he's already married, and he just had his eldest son sent to the wall, so he can't inherit any of his lands, which means he has to give all of his lands to Tyrion, or just, scatter them to somebody else, give them to a brother or a cousin or something like that. Tywin would have been pissed at this point. And now we come to Tywin ordering the deaths of Lyanna Martell and her children, the children of Prince Rhaegar, as well. Well, as we all know, Ned was none too happy about this. So now we beg the question, would Ned have done anything against Tywin? Would he have stripped him of his lands? Would he have ordered him executed and all that stuff? I don't really think he would have gone to those extremes to punish him, or even if he was about to. I think Jon Arryn probably would have tried to talk him out of it because, I mean, if you think about it, the Lannister forces are still in the city right now, and, I mean, if we're going to assume that Robert is there with his forces, and, I mean, Ned obviously brought some forces too. So I think if Ned had said, by the way, Tywin, we're going to chop your head off because of what you did to those kids and Lyanna, I think there probably would have been a second war right in the capital right then and there. So I think Jon Arryn would have said, "Look, we can't. You've already pissed him off enough. Let's just let this thing slide. It was war. He was helping us out, but I think Ned would have resented Tywin a lot at that point still, and Tywin certainly would have resented Ned at that point. For sending Jaime to the wall and not allowing Cersei to marry the king. But as far as the children goes, I don't think he would have taken too much of a drastic action. I think he would have just sort of like let that slide. Otherwise, he would have had another rebellion on his hands right then and there. Okay, so now Ned's on the throne. He brings Catelyn up to the capital. She probably already has Robb at this point. And so they are, move their family up there. So now the Starks are no longer in the north, which might have been one of the reasons why Ned just didn't want to take the throne in the first place. So now, as far as the north goes, I mean, some other family has to take over up in the north. And who was the second most powerful family beside the Starks in the north? The Boltons. Now, for those people who read the books, I mean, we know what happens when the Boltons take over the north. A lot of people unhappy, a lot of people getting flayed alive for no reason, and there's already plots to overthrow the Boltons. I mean, there wouldn't have been, if Ned had been king and, left the Boltons in charge, I don't think there wouldn't have been, Stannis getting involved. But with the Boltons in charge, it would have only been a matter of time before the North had its own little rebellion against the Boltons, and somebody else tried to take over. So Ned would have had that to contend with. Now, there are two significant events in the original story that happened right after the sack of King's Landing. The first was the releasing of the siege on Storm's End. Basically the Tyrell family, who were loyal to the crown beforehand, they had, blocked off Storm's End, which was being held by Stannis. And, they never went into the castle and tried to take it that way, but they basically just cut the castle off from the real world, and no food could get in there. But Stannis held out, and, of course we have Davos, smuggling in some onions and some meat so that, those soldiers could eat. But basically, they held Storm's End until Ned actually came, and the Tyrells basically just saw Ned coming with his army, and they went away, and they never really fought against him. Now, if Ned had been king, he would have sent his most capable lieutenant to free the siege on Storm's End, which means he would have sent Robert Baratheon. Now, if he had sent Robert, I don't think it would have been all that much of a difference. Like I said, the Tyrells, they didn't really put up a fight. They pretty much just saw the other army coming, and they knew that King Aerys had already fallen, so they just said, okay, fine, we'll go away. And so if they saw Robert coming with an army, I don't really think they would have reacted any differently. So that pretty much would have gone the same way that it did in the original story, except for the fact that it would have been Robert and Stannis, and Stannis was so happy with Ned when he saw him, and always considered him an honorable man, but his relationship with Robert was a lot more complicated than that, so that would have been a little bit more awkward. But then we come to the other significant event that happened right after the sack of King's Landing and after the release of the siege on Storm's End. After Ned had freed Storm's End from the Tyrells, then he went off to rescue Lyanna and tried to find where Prince Rhaegar had been keeping her. So now if he had been king, Robert would have been the one to find her at the Tower of Joy. Now, as far as what would have happened when Robert arrived at the Tower of Joy, I don't think that would have been all that much different, other than Robert would have said, well, why are you guys here instead of, guarding the king? Or you might have said, well, who's in there? Who are you guarding? And, then you got Sir Arthur Dayne and Oswald went, and somebody Hightower, I forget their names. But, they would have said, we're Kingsguard, we took a vow, we do not flee. I don't think Robert would have really cared all that much about it. And the outcome of the battle would have been pretty much the same. The only thing is, I think there would have been more survivors. I think Robert Baratheon would have gone through those guys quicker than Ned did. So, I mean, they were pretty good. I mean, originally it was just Ned and Howland Reed that actually survived that fight. But I think Robert would have killed those three guys, and I think he would have had more survivors on his side. But that's just, that's just speculation. It wouldn't really have mattered in the long run. But anyway, then we come to what he would have found in the tower. So Robert goes into the tower and he finds Lyanna in the bed of blood. And I don't think Lyanna would have reacted the exact same way she did when she found Ned. I think the reaction would have been a little bit more awkward. You see, the thing is, I don't think Lyanna was ever really interested in Robert. I mean, she was betrothed to him, but I think that was more out of duty rather than, anything she wanted. Because I think Lyanna seems like she was a smart person. So she would have known Robert's ways. He knew he was a man whore. And yes, Robert did like her a lot, love her a lot. Maybe he could have been loyal to her had she survived. But I don't think she would have believed that. But anyway, so now Robert's there instead of Ned. And Lyanna has to discuss with Robert what's happening while she's dying. Now, as we know, she was found in a bed of blood. So then we assume that she gave birth. So here's where I need to get sidetracked a little bit. Now, for those of you who do not, read the books or don't read any of the forums, don't follow up on any of the theories, this might be a little bit of a spoiler to you. Anybody who pays any attention to this stuff at all will not find it a surprise. Now, the common theory is that Lyanna did just give birth. That's why she was in the bed of blood. But everybody, the common theory is R plus L equals J, which basically means that Lyanna had Rhaegar's child, and that child turned out to be Jon Snow. Now, as I personally stated in my, Song of Ice and Fire predictions, I don't believe that. I think there's just too many holes in the theory. There's just too many clues that were given, in the opposite direction. I personally am under the theory that Daenerys was actually Lyanna's and Rhaegar's child. I have stated why before, and if everybody wants me to go into that into more depth, I will do that in another video if I get enough. Leave me a comment below, say if you do want me to justify this explanation. But in the meantime, I will leave you a link to Jacob Preston's, Tower of Joy video, and he explains this stuff a lot better than I do. And I do have some arguments to this, that he doesn't mention. But anyway, for the sake of this video, let's just assume that R plus L equals J, and it actually was Jon Snow that she had given birth to. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind is that Ned is kind of fuzzy about what actually happened that day. I mean, he has reoccurring dreams of, Lyanna saying to him, promise me, Ned, promise me. And he has vague recollections of the Tower of Joy being brought down and all that stuff after he left and all that stuff. So that's why there's not a whole lot of information about what exactly happened that day. Now, if Robert had showed up there instead of Ned, would that have been any different? Well, certainly Robert would have handled, the fact of Lyanna having just given birth to Rhaegar's child. He would have handled that a lot differently, certainly. Now, Robert definitely would have been upset. He definitely would have seen this as Rhaegar having violated Lyanna, and he probably would have seen her child as somewhat of an abomination. Now, would he have killed the child? Well, certainly not right there in front of Lyanna. He certainly wouldn't have done that. I mean, he still loved Lyanna, and I certainly don't think he would have wanted to do anything to upset her. But now here he is, she's given birth to this male child, and certainly, it's kind of hard to speculate on what the conversation would have been, but I think in the end, it would have been, basically the message of it would have been the same. I think Lyanna definitely would have made Robert promise to look after the child, do something with him, take him to Ned, or do something with him. But back in the back of Robert's mind, he would have been thinking, this is a Targaryen, and we need to get rid of all the Targaryens. I mean, remember, he wanted to get rid of Daenerys at first. But, if it had been Lyanna's child, he would have had a lot of mixed feelings about that. But like I said, Robert did love Lyanna, so I do think that he would have honored her wishes. And I think she would have told him, look, take him back to Ned, let Ned take care of him. So I think Robert would have headed right back to King's Landing and said, here's Lyanna's child. Now, if Ned had, just taken... Yeah, Ned probably would have taken Jon right there and raised him, and would have been interesting to see how Catelyn would have reacted at that point, because she wouldn't have seen Jon as Ned's bastard. She would have seen him as Rhaegar and Lyanna's bastard. So I think, yeah, they probably would have been very accepting of him. But now, the only thing is, the Starks and the Baratheons are not the only ones who have a say in this. There would have also been... Everybody basically would have known that the new king was raising another Targaryen heir. Okay, so now there is one other war that was in between the sack of King's Landing and, the very beginning of Game of Thrones when Robert asks Ned to be the hand of the king. There was the Greyjoy Rebellion. Now, as far as would it have ended up any differently had Ned been on the throne, I don't think so. Robert would have, led the forces again, and, Robert was completely fine. He was a good soldier. He was the kind of guy who, somebody was trying to kill him one day, and then they were having fun drinking with him the next day. And also, Stannis was a big part of ending that war. I mean, he was the one who destroyed the Greyjoy fleet. And, actually, interesting thing about that was, Stannis, he thought the Greyjoys should have been executed, for trying to rebel. But Robert said, no, they were just trying to rebel, and we can't just execute the whole family for it. Would Ned have done that? Probably not. Certainly don't think he would want to execute a whole family. He definitely would have taken, Theon as a hostage. He might have become Robert's ward instead of Ned's, because Ned's the king, and he already had Jon, which was a ward himself. So yeah, Theon probably would have ended up with Robert. That is one thing that's different. Now, one thing that would have been different behind the scenes, though. So as I discussed before, Tywin, he's not happy with the Starks. He's, Ned being king cost the Lannisters a lot, and I think Tywin would have been plotting against Ned from day one. He probably would have seen the Greyjoy Rebellion as a opportunity, to really strike at the crown and maybe start his own rebellion. So he probably would have tried to help the Greyjoys out. The thing is, the Greyjoys, they don't accept help from anybody. Would they have accepted help from Tywin Lannister? Probably not. If Cersei had been, still single at that point, would Tywin probably would have tried to marry off Cersei to Balon, I think. Though I don't think Balon would have accepted. I mean, he very well could have, because Cersei, she is a good-looking woman, and this was back, when she was young and hadn't had any, and in this timeline she wouldn't have had any children, so she would have been perfect wife material at that point. But even then, even with that, Balon would have said, well, if he expects me to, excuse me, if he expects me to marry her, then he expects him to help me in the rebellion, and we do not accept help. We take what's ours, all that stuff. So I don't think he would have taken Tywin's help. The only thing that really would have been different was in the original story, Tywin, the Lannister forces, they actually try to stop the Greyjoys in their fleet, but they get their asses handed to them. So the only thing that would have been different was, the Lannisters wouldn't have lent any forces to stop the Greyjoys in the first place. So now that Tywin has tried to marry Cersei off to 3 different kings and has been snubbed 3 times, let's talk about the other large faction that would not have wanted Ned on the throne. Now remember, Ned is from the north and he worships the old gods. Now in King's Landing, it's the new gods, the 7, that are the big religion there. So yes, the Sparrows would have not been happy about having Ned on the throne. So they would have been trying to work behind the scenes to get rid of him too. Now they didn't have their army at this point, so they would have had to do everything covertly. But still, they would have tried to do something. Now, if Tywin was clever, he's the one that they would try to help. He would get them on his side. I mean, he technically does follow the 7, so they would have been, perfectly happy helping him to get Ned off the throne. Now, what exactly they could have done, I can't really think of anything right now, but they definitely would have tried to discredit him. One thing I think they would have done is, sort of let all the people of King's Landing know that, you've got somebody who worships the old gods on the throne, and they probably would have gone with Ned with an ultimatum and said, either convert to, be anointed in the light of the 7, or, give up the crown, and Ned probably would have said no to that. Now, there is a good possibility they would have declared his marriage to Cat null and void. Now, Ned and Cat were married in River Run, so they probably were, married under the light of the 7. But see, here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking they would have declared, well, if Ned is, somebody who worships the old gods, then, his marriage to Catelyn, unless he's willing to convert, it doesn't count. I think they would have, found some sort of loophole somewhere that would have been magically, they would have suddenly found a written document, says, you can't have somebody who worships the old god marry, somebody who's the new god. So he would have declared all of his children, and how many, he would have definitely had Robb at this point, had Jon. Depending on how far along this went, they might have had Sansa at this point. But he basically would have declared, they would have declared all their children bastards. That's what I think would have happened. Now, of course, again, this is just speculation, but I'm just thinking this is one of the plots they could have used in order to try to debunk Ned and sort of get the people against him. Then again, Ned did have some forces. He could have called some banners and tried to oust them again, but that would have gotten the people against him. So there's a good possibility he would have publicly just denounced the old gods and just gone with the news so that that would have happened. But I don't know. I'm not sure they would have given him that loophole. Now, of course, I have to bring up the fact that Littlefinger is still in the picture somewhere. Now, while he was the master of coin for Robert, he managed to get the kingdom into an enormous amount of debt without Robert knowing or without Robert caring in the first place. Now, Ned, on the other hand, he would have been a lot more stringent. He would have been a lot more tight-fisted, and the crown never would have gotten into the amount of debt it did under Robert, and especially with Jon Arryn on his side. So I don't think Littlefinger could have done that to thwart him, but he did have another plan, didn't he? Now remember, when Jon Arryn was the Hand of the King, Lysa was there in the capital with him. So, and that's where Littlefinger, well, didn't meet her there, but he had a lot of contact with her there, and he sort of turned her against Jon Arryn, and eventually convinced her to poison Jon Arryn. Now, would he have done that plot had Ned been the king? Maybe, maybe not. I definitely do think that Littlefinger would have worked with Tywin, try and do something. Maybe not poison Jon Arryn, but definitely Tywin and Littlefinger would have teamed up and would have hatched some plot. If not with the Sparrows and the High Septon, they would have hatched some plot. So Littlefinger and Tywin would have definitely got together to sow some discord and try to get Ned out of there. So you have to figure with the High Septons and Tywin and Littlefinger all working against Ned since day one, and Ned being just a little bit too trusting and naive and a little bit too honorable. You gotta think there would have been a plot against him, and there would have been that plot would have taken place rather quickly, as it didn't in Robert's case. Even with the Greyjoy, even though the Greyjoy rebellion wouldn't have factored into Tywin and Littlefinger's plot at all, they definitely would have caused a lot of problems for Ned. Would they have succeeded in causing chaos and all-out civil war? They very well could have, but definitely. But in conclusion, was it a mistake for Ned to not take the throne? I don't think so. I think Westeros would have been thrown into turmoil and chaos just as easily as it was with Roberts, only it would have happened a hell of a lot sooner. And if you think about it, I mean, nothing really bad happened until Ned was sent to King's Landing in the first place. Now, of course, that was all a plot of Littlefinger, not trying to spoil anybody who hasn't, seen the show or read the books yet, but anyway, we know that Littlefinger did eventually bring about the War of the Five Kings in the original story, and he definitely would have done it if Ned had taken over. It just probably would have been a lot sooner, and Tywin would have been in on it from the beginning. So in conclusion, I don't think Ned did the wrong thing letting Robert take the throne. I think in the long run, Ned did do the right thing. And so that are my thoughts on what would have happened if Ned had taken the throne the day of the sack of King's Landing. Hope you enjoyed that. Now, if you think of any ways that Tywin and Littlefinger would have plotted against Ned, with or without the High Septons in the church, go ahead and leave in the comments below, or any thoughts you may have on this topic at all, leave them in the comments. I'd like this to be sort of an open discussion about what could have been. Granted, maybe it doesn't matter in the long run. And again, if you want me to try and justify why I think R plus L equals D and not J, leave that below. I'll certainly, and if I feel enough people want me to do that, I will do that. So please comment, rate, and subscribe. You know the drill. Until next time, this is Isaiah Sanderson telling everybody, make your lives grand and have a good day. Thank you very much.